Maybe they're not intentionally thinking about, well, how they run their party is going to be indicative of how they're going to run government. But if you have a very efficient party, if you have a party that's very focused on winning elections and communicating a message, then voters see that. But if voters see dysfunction, that does in some way translate to how they think Democrats will behave in government. And so we have to model the best behavior as Democrats in terms of how we run our organization, and we should be laser focused on winning elections. That means embracing a Big Tent. That means engaging in coalitional politics. That means acknowledging that the party demographics have been changing over a very long time in the South, and that the way we win is that we don't win through this weird addition through subtraction method. We have to win by adding more folks to our side than the Republicans. And I think that healing that dysfunction would be really great, because that allows us to also focus on winning elections.
Alrighty, welcome in. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, David?
Man, I'm good, man. This is my kind of weather. See, we're in a space and time where the temperatures have been like upper 70s, very low 80s, nice breeze. This is my kind of weather. So I'm feeling good right now.
I hate you. I hate you. In here wearing damn
you
sleeves
like to
in
sweat, man.
August.
You
Wearing
like to
sleeves in
sweat.
August. That ain't right. That ain't right.
And I've been doing that, by the way. I've been wearing sleeves in August. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. The only thing I'm doing is taking comfort in knowing that the payback for this is 90 degrees in November. And so I know it's coming. And I'm just looking forward to everybody being upset about this warm Christmas and a warm Thanksgiving that we're having. And I'm going to be living life, buddy, living life. Because this is some nonsense right here. I do not care for what we have experienced over the last couple of days. Walked outside last night and it's all cold, taking the garbage out. Man, damn. All right, hey, before we get into today's show, this week's show, I guess, I need to tell you about our good friends over at Wind Creek Entertainment. They sponsor us and do a fantastic job here and all around the state. We really appreciate them for what they do. They're the state's #1 hospitality employer. They are also one of the state's top employers all the way around. And, at this point, they may be the top employer because, they're buying up things and employing a ton of Alabamians. And people don't realize, every time we talk, about the Porch Creeks, we talk about them and most of the time in terms of gambling and whatnot, and rightfully so. They run 3 great resorts in this state, and they offer electronic bingo in those states and or in those facilities. And I think it's, they are top-notch casinos and resorts. Yeah. And they offer a lot of really fun things to do at those places for not just folks going to gamble, but folks they're just there for the night, stopping by, eating, going to the spas, hanging around the pool, all sorts of concerts and entertainment going on around those places. And so you should really check those out. But in addition to all that, they also operate a number of other businesses. I want to say it's somewhere upwards of 20 at this point around the state. And that's other hotels that are not in the casino realm, in the casino world.
Right.
They operate a number of businesses in the Huntsville area that are tied to a variety of things. They have a huge program that works with NASA. They have other programs that work with Disney and work with the military. They do a tremendous job. And all of that, keep in mind, you hear a lot about how they don't pay any taxes, but all of those things pay taxes. And all of those employees pay taxes. And all of that money stays here in the state of Alabama. And that's true also for a lot of those casinos that they operate on the south side of Chicago, in Pennsylvania, and Aruba, and in other locations. All of that money gets returned right back here, and we enjoy the benefits of a lot of it. So we really appreciate them for what they do for us and for what they've done for the state. They are pretty awesome citizens here around here, and we really do appreciate having them around. All righty. We had elections this week.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's good news, bad news. Our friend Billy Jackson, I thought had a real shot in Decatur, ended up not winning, fell to the establishment candidate, Kent Lawrence, Kent Lawrence is a good guy. And I know a lot of people who know Kent Lawrence. I know a lot of people who are right now saying, Kent Lawrence is mayor? Really? But I mean, it's not that that's not that he's a stupid person or anything like that. No, I'm not criticizing his intelligence or anything. He run a business for a long time, been on the planning commission for years. And so, I'm not criticizing that. He just doesn't really strike anybody as the mayoral type. Okay. I mean, that's just and, but, he was the safe candidate over in Decatur. And so
okay, but Billy Jackson has been, he's been on that council for, well, I'm going to guess here close to 30 years or so.
29 years.
Does that sound about right? 29. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He's a known entity. He's, Billy is, I've dealt with Billy, on and off through the years. I've always thought him to be a really smart person with integrity.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? You talked about Kent being the safe candidate. Did people see Billy as not safe? What do you think was going on there?
I think, and when we say people, I'm speaking of the old powers that be, the Cooks, the Sheltons, the folks that run the city of Decatur, the folks, the Fights, the Gobble Fight, the builders, the realtors. Those were big supporters of Kent Lawrence. They dumped a lot of money into him. They helped hire a really good strategy. I think I can't remember the names, Dalton Dismuse's group that runs elections in the state, and helped him with his strategy and his consulting and polling and looking at what they needed to do. So this is the problem, and we've had Mayor Reed on, we've had Randall Woodfin on. All those guys have experienced issues, and you hear a lot of it about just the tremendous amount of criticism that they have, and I'll tell you just flat out, a lot of it goes back to money. When a guy like Billy comes in, when a guy like Stephen Reed comes in, Randall comes in, they are the first black mayor, the first black whoever, the first that's a progressive sort of a person. It's a change, and everybody knows that it's a change. And those people have different friends. They have different people who they are aligned with. They have different priorities. You saw it with Stephen, and a lot of Stephen's problems is, I'll tell you where a lot of it came from, is the fact that he did away with some of I didn't do away with, but changed who was receiving a lot of the city contracts. Some of the city contracts that have traditionally gone to the old establishment law firms now went to law firms that had black partners. And it was one of his priorities. And, you could have changed as a law firm and hired some black partners, but they, instead decided to pitch a fit and dump money behind a moron to run against him. And so, so I think that sort of stuff, you get, Billy is going to come in, and we know him, and the city knew him. And this was kind of my fear of Billy being the candidate, going in. I've told him, and I've told you, I like him. I love him to death for what he's tried to do in the city of Decatur. But my fear was he had a 30-year history there of being the voice that said, this shit ain't right. You're doing it wrong. You're making these people suffer for your benefits over here, and and raising hell about it. And he's been the rabble rouser and painted as now it's fun to say that the black guy is the racist because he was standing up for black people. And so that's what he's been painted as in Decatur. He's a racist, because of some of the issues that he took with some things. And, that was my concern with them, was he was going to be painted this way as this radical person from the outside. And he was going to, let's be honest, he was going to come in and he was going to have different priorities. I'm not saying that they're the wrong priorities by any stretch of the imagination. I guarantee you they would have been better than some of the old shit that we've been doing down there. As we just saw, they just voted to give Cook's Museum, which, by the way, I love. I think it's a great museum and a great place for kids and stuff down there. But they just voted to pay a really big amount of money to help that place expand again over there. And Billy was the sole vote against that. And the reason that he voted against it was a very sound reason. We don't know enough. There's no transparency on this. All right. We don't know what we're getting ourselves tied into, and for what reason that we're getting ourselves tied into this. That's a very sound reason for a city councilman, but it went against the establishment and all of these old people that have been getting all of this money for all of this time and who've been able to reliably count on the city being there to bail them out of bad deals with another deal just down the line. You see it all the time with Fight Construction, Gobble Fight, and all these places around. You see the nets up everywhere. Those are the people that back Kent Lawrence, because Kent Lawrence was been on the planning commission. They know him. He's been approving their work for years and years and years. They know how to work with Kent. They know what to do with him. He's safe. He's not going to rock the boat. And this is the reason why he gets elected. And so
just good old,
I was hopeful that wasn't going to be the case. Yeah, it was. It was good old boy politics. Yeah, of course it was. And and that's at a little small point in there, Billy and I got a little crossways because of something that I said, and it was. This was back when we thought Nicholas Perkins was going to run. And I thought Nicholas would have been a very good candidate as well, simply because he didn't have that history there. And I think people could have tied him. Of course, Nick lost in his race in District 1 as well. But I think that's a different set of circumstances. And, I said at the time when Billy was going to get in there and there were going to be, people thought it was going to be him and Nicholas running against each other for mayor, that they were going to split the vote. And that's a kind of a good old boy tactic of making sure that black candidates don't get elected. And and he thought I was calling him the good old boy candidate. And I said, how in the world would you ever think I was calling you a good old boy candidate? I mean, my God, man, you're the antithesis of the good old boy candidate. You've caused more good old boys heartburn than anybody I know, I think. But and rightfully so.
Yeah.
I was hopeful that the city would finally see the error of the way that they've been doing things and the way that they've been hosing themselves for years with this system that vests power in just a handful of people. But they chose to go a different way. I will say, in good news though, there were a couple of city council people who have been very active in those protests who are now elected. One is elected and another looks like she's going to be elected, and they were really the leaders of the Steve Perkins protests. One of them's going to take over for Hunter Pepper. What's that?
Yeah, 2 women too, right?
No, one was women, a man,
right?
And the other was
Terrence. Terrence, the one
Terrence
who won
Atkins,
against Nick. Yeah.
And Sarah French.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that too. What I assume Nick would have been the odds-on favorite there. Nothing against Terrence Atkins, but what happened there?
I think Terrence was just a better known commodity than Nicholas was. Terrence has lived there for years and years and years. He's the co-founder of Standing in Power. Terrence has been living there his whole life. And so I think that people know him and they like him. They like his leadership. They like what he's been doing. He's been around that area for a while. This is not a knock on Nicholas, but Nicholas is kind of a lately guy, and he was thrust into this because of the tragedy that happened with his brother. Nicholas is a wonderful person. Really love him a lot, but I think that people rewarded Terrence for what he's done for his entire life around there, and I think he'll represent that district very, very well. Sarah French, kind of the same way. She looks like she'll end up being most likely the candidate. I mean, she almost won it outright in a 5-person race as it was, and she was another one who's been very, very active in those protests, and will represent the District 4, I believe. That was Hunter Pepper's district. So, I mean, whoever it is.
That guy.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, whoever it is, that's addition by subtraction there. Even if nobody filled the damn seat. So we'll have, now there'll be some folks there'll be a couple of other people. It's a shame that Billy's not on there. He'd have some help,
Have we seen the last of Hunter Pepper, though? Do you think is there a contingent of people over there that are going to try to position him for something else in the future?
No, I think Hunter was enough of a problem that I think he burned pretty much every bridge he had. And honestly, he was a mistake to begin with. I mean, it was, he was just tossed up there as the city's response. And this again, the old power broker type folks, that kind of run things. And until I'll tell you what would help a lot is if everybody who can vote would actually get up off their ass over there and go vote, because this is the way that they got hurt with this is, that's how they ended up with Hunter Pepper is those folks, with the realtors and some of the other people, they pushed a certain group of candidates back when they were trying to shove through that stupid 3M deal, the settlement with 3M. To bail 3M out and stop the litigation that they should have gone into. The litigation that right now is, they basically just given them a free pass for the most part on things when they could have held them accountable, like a couple of other cities have done, and really made some changes to the city and the city water around there. But it's disappointing that Billy didn't win. It is heartening that a couple of other folks seem like they're gonna win. One did, and the other seems like she's going to. So maybe some changes are on the way for at least the council to try to get some things done. And we also know some things have been done. And, you got rid of Tab Bowling, who was a terrible mayor. I can't imagine that Kent Lawrence is going to be worse than that. And you've got a new police chief over there, and Tory Mack, who I think people are really, really high on. And so I think that that will help. And I think people are praising have already been praising the police department in Decatur for the change in attitude and the approach to dealing with citizens. And that is a very good thing to see.
Good.
I'll tell you, I have rarely been happier to see someone lose than Wandalyn Gavon in Birmingham, where Randall Woodfin wiped the old floor up. There. I mean, look, I liked Wandalyn's outspoken nature in the legislature. Okay. I liked the way that she did things. And when she was fighting for a cause on stuff, she was often a voice that you could rely on to go out and say the things that made the people that were pushing these terrible bills and things that were harmful to people, that made them incredibly uncomfortable and put them in incredibly difficult positions and called them out on their bullshit. But I don't know what happened necessarily, but at some point, to me, and this is my opinion, it's not the opinion of anybody else or in my opinion, in this particular race, it was more about her than it was about anything else. And she did this this whole stupid tactic of talking about, from the very start, where we need to call in the National Guard and just doing these things that seem to play up the right-wing talking points of stuff just to get attention for herself. Not to mention the ridiculous videos and the way she acts and the way she acted during the debate. And I mean, it was just, it was so performative and disingenuous that I think a lot of people saw through it. And I don't know that she's going to be back in the legislature when the next race comes about. I think she's going to lose that one as well. And I think that, and rightfully so, she's done this to herself. And I think she's alienated a number of people. Now, she's currently being sued by another candidate there for defamation. And I think he's got a pretty strong case for that defamation case. The things that they've said about him were awful, especially if there's no hint of truth to any of it. It is terrible, the things that they said about him for no good reason whatsoever. And so I hope that Randall ends up being a very, very good mayor. I think he's on the right track. I like Randall Woodfin. I like the way that he has handled a lot of business there in Birmingham. And I think that some of the criticisms and things that have come about for him are unfair. And I think that in terms of doing a good job, I think he's done about as well as you could hope for.
Yeah, I think he's done a pretty good job, though I do question, just how, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. Let me be clear. But just how aggressive and strategic he's been about dealing with some of those deeply rooted problems in Birmingham related to certain parts of the community and the economic struggles of certain parts of the community. And, there's still places in Birmingham where you can drive through, and I've done it within the past year or two, where you feel like you might be in a war zone. I mean, it's not quite up to standard, the standard you like to see in a city that seems to have so much else going for it. So I always wonder about those areas of town that just seem to have been just absolutely neglected. I mean, there's nothing happening other than the worst possible thing. And again, I'm not saying, I mean, it's taken decades to create that. So I'm not saying one person can come in and just change it overnight. But I always wonder, what are they doing? Is he doing something to address that? You know, and I don't know.
Yeah. No, and I know exactly what you mean, and you're right. I've seen them myself, you know, and there are portions of the city. You know, I'll never forget. You know, I used to love going and covering games at the old Great Lady down there in Legion Field, and just as you know, that area is not great anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there are other areas, like you said, it does. It's not. I mean, there's some areas adjacent to, for example, the new amphitheater. You know, there are some areas adjacent to that are not great. I mean, really not great. But you know, I also understand the struggle of, you know, trying to attract business to an economically depressed area. You know, trying to, especially if there are crime issues in those areas. You know, trying to do something. And I think at times it can be overwhelming. And you're right, it didn't happen overnight, and so solving them can sometimes take years, or a few decent terms as mayor anyway. And so I think that he's trying in a lot of it. And I don't know specifics either, but I think he's trying and moving himself, or moving the city, I think, in a positive direction. And I think he's done a lot. I think they've talked a lot about the crime issues there, and there's been a decline over the last, several months in crime, and violent crime especially. And I think that's, he's done that. I think that I'm not alone, of course, but I think in conjunction with some other people and working hard and being present, I think he has shown a great compassion for the way that he handles things, and showing up to some of those crime scenes as he has, and talking with people. I think that's made a difference in the way that he has approached it. And I think his approach to that has been very genuine. And I like him. I like the way he's handled business there. And so, but so I was happy to see him win, and win easily. Barbara Drummond, friend of the show, been on many times as well. Barbara Drummond going to be in a runoff with Nick Chiriagatis down in Mobile. Drummond finished first in that race, 4-person race. She finished at the top, and Chiriagatis had a wide lead in fundraising going into that thing, and had a lot of the support. The former mayor had tossed his support behind him, and then I don't know exactly how much difference it made, but the self-inflicted wound of saying that his father was nearly murdered by, killed someone who was trying to murder him, and then and kind of used that as a sad story for himself. And then, as it turned out, it was his father who shot the gentleman in the back, and narrowly avoided a murder charge himself for that, and was convicted of manslaughter. And so I think that caused him some issues. But good congrats to Barbara Drummond, and the way that she was able to win there, and at least head into the runoff with the lead. And so maybe those votes will break for her. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough in that race. So any others looking around?
Well, I was going to say, in fact, I was scrolling here trying to see if I could find it. I know that there was an activist that I know, Carletta Davis, who was running, well, this was in Prichard. And I bring this up. I know Prichard is a small community and maybe doesn't even register for a lot of people. But I bring Carletta up because she was at the forefront of getting what became, I think, if I recall correctly, a national story about the mercaptan leak there at 8 Mile. There in Prichard. And I was wondering how she did. I was trying to see if I could find it, because she was running for one of the city council positions there in Prichard. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I'll look it up here as well. There were a handful of others. Hoover had a mayoral change there. The mayor of Hoover got beat by the former police chief, which you may remember from. His name is Nick Durzis. He was the guy in the colorful suits back during it was the girl that was allegedly missing, and then we all found out she'd faked it. Carly.
Yeah, I can't remember her name.
Carly
but
Russell,
yeah.
is that her name? Carly Reynolds?
Carly something.
Yeah.
I don't, in fact, I didn't even remember her first name until you said it, but yeah, I remember Carly something.
Yeah, so anyways, that police chief who I guess, I don't know if that was the springboard or not. I know the mayor there has faced some mounting criticisms over some stuff, and one of the things being a healthcare facility deal that's going on. But I think that was a big change. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, had them all over. You did say it was Prichard, is that right? Prichard? Is that in Prichard. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said city council. Carletta was running for mayor. And apparently she, according to this one account, she is going to be in a runoff, it looks like. So. Oh, okay. Good deal. Yeah, good deal for her. And again, I think, and she's leading in the runoff. So, I think that's a good thing for that little city. And again, because of what they've been through, I just think it'll speak volumes if she is elected. And I think it'll put her in a good position, perhaps, because as far as I know, they still haven't resolved that issue down there. And I know the couple times that I went there to look into it, I can tell you, it was a concern to a lot of people, and the folks down there were disproportionately being affected. Their health was really being disproportionately affected. Yeah. In a negative way because of that Mercaptan leak and how unresolved that issue was. Oh, yeah. Well, that if I'm not mistaken, there's an investigation I think still ongoing into a lot of that down there. Well, there should be. I know that there was some talk about that, and it's been a minute, honestly, since I've really talked to her and gotten caught up on it. But it's a serious thing. I know that it had a real detrimental impact on that little community. So I'm glad to see her. I'm glad to see that she's taken the lead, and hopefully that means she'll end up leading that city and put her in a position to do more to help them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was, like I said, it was a mixed bag of things, some good, some bad. And it looks like, folks are, did pay attention, although the turnouts were in some places were not what you'd like to see. You'd like to see more folks taking advantage of the right to vote and to get involved and to, vote for themselves and their interests. So, y'all get out and vote and do what you can to help some of these folks out, and they're good people, and get them into office. All right. Let's, speaking of voting and problems and things, we're going to have Matt Hughes from the DNC on with us. Matt's a member of the DNC and also a member of the Credentials Committee that have been hearing the case of the Alabama Democratic Party and kind of trying to solve our mess. Okay, we've now farmed our mess out. We're exporting messes out to other states or to other people to handle, and so we're going to see if they can handle it at the DNC level with Matt. He's from North Carolina, so we'll talk to him, get his view on what's taking place and what they're doing in terms of the Alabama Democratic Party. We'll be back in a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to have with us Matt Hughes. Matt is with the DNC. He's a DNC member from North Carolina, newly appointed member of the Credentials Committee with the DNC. And I guess, first of all, Matt, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, I'm happy to be here.
And I guess first and foremost, we should probably apologize on behalf of all the Alabamians for sending our nonsense up there for y'all to deal with. So as we covered a little bit last week, the Alabama Democratic Party is once again back before the Credentials Committee and back before another committee with the DNC over election this, alleged malfeasance that has taken place. And I guess, Matt, if you wouldn't mind, where do things kind of stand at this point? Like, so I know, was it Monday that you took a vote, as the DNC took a vote, and so where do things stand now in terms of where the Alabama Democratic Party is with the most recent nonsense of having 3 people that they sort of appointed as DNC members, and now I don't even know where we are.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. So, of course, the most recent challenge comes out of a mandated re-election or to redo the elections in Alabama for the DNC. At our last meeting earlier this year, when we elected Ken Martin as our DNC chair, there was still a question as to who was going to be seated from Alabama. That keeps coming up because of how the elections process has been working. And so, we're back here because there was supposed to be yet another election in April. And surprise, surprise, there's another challenge because of how that election was conducted. So the previous composition of the Credentials Committee came forward with a relatively nuanced approach, which was, let's go ahead and seat these folks who are questionable, and we acknowledge that there's questions, but let's seat those folks so Alabama has its full contingent and can vote. I, suggested that folks vote against that credentials report, in part because if it's a flawed election, then whoever is voting cannot purport to represent, all Alabamian Democrats. I don't think that says a lot. It gives the state theoretically full voting strength, but, it was a flawed election to begin with. So who's being represented by doing that? And so, by voting it down, it goes back to the Credentials Committee. The newly constituted Credentials Committee will have this as one of its first orders of business.
All right, so that was Joe M. Reed, who is Joe L. Reed's son, Donna Foster, and then there was another gentleman that he had won his election by a fairly substantial amount, and so I thought that they were going to let him kind of stand, but I guess we've invalidated all 3 at this point.
Yeah, so by not adopting the report, my understanding is that all 3 were not able to participate. And I think the rationale was that the gentleman won by such a large margin that, that would probably, he could have foreseeably won, had all the properly credentialed folks been allowed to vote.
Right. So I guess then, so what we're basically, to kind of put this down on the ground level. I guess what we're basically looking at here is a situation where they're now hoping for a stronger resolution against the Alabama Democratic Party. I mean, I guess I'll ask you, what would you like to see happen? What would you like to see happen for the Alabama Democratic Party?
Well, this seems to be a recurring problem where going all the way back to 2019, where, the DNC, that was before my time on the DNC. I became a member in 2020, but where the DNC, required a rewriting of the Alabama charter and bylaws, invalidating those elections, having to strip folks of their credentials. I mean, there seems to be a fairly systemic and structural problem within the Alabama Democratic Party. And I think that the Credentials Committee should, foreseeably look at, other structural issues that keep producing this result of, every year, it seems like, bringing back the Alabama Democratic Party for another election. But, in 2023, when we met in October in St. Louis, the Alabama Democratic Party hadn't submitted its delegate selection plan to the DNC. That was due 2 months beforehand. Delegation chairs were not, my understanding is there was some sort of thing that was worked out within their delegation for the DNC last year, where Congresswoman Sewell was one of the co-chairs. That's normally something reserved for the state party chair in many different states. And then, just looking at the fact that these DNC elections keep coming up, there has to be something else there. I liked the resolution of our Credentials Committee to have the DNC staff go down to Alabama, but I think that it's really hard for our DNC staff to be both the facilitator, which means an active participant, and an umpire. And I definitely think that some section of the membership of the Credentials Committee need to go and observe so that our staff are not having to be on both sides of the table there.
Well, Matt, I'm going to come at this a little bit differently, and let me stipulate that I, like Josh, have real frustrations and concerns with this, what seems to be just an ongoing battle between the ADP and the DNC. And both of us feel like it's just absolutely not productive, doesn't help us in this state. I'm an active member of the Democratic Party, so it really frustrates me, as an active member and as somebody who votes for Democrats most of the time. However, the first question that pops into my mind really is about some of the, I guess I'll say, allegations that have been made by leaders of the Democratic Party here in this state. They have come on this podcast, and they've also been pretty open in other media arenas about the fact that they believe that there is an agenda that has been set against them by outside influences. And they often mention former U.S. Senator Doug Jones when they bring this up. What's your response to that allegation?
I've actually had the opportunity to speak with former Senator Jones. Actually, on the day of the revote, we were both at a summit in Denver, and I was asking him how things were going down in Alabama. I think there are a lot of state parties that have this friction between, elected leaders and other folks who hold public office and hold party office, and who is with whom. And I think that that's not a really productive relationship. For me, I think that, we can look at the voter statistics and everything else in Alabama, and I think there's a good case to be made that we could definitely begin to turn Alabama blue over the long haul. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I don't think we can wish or pray for similar candidates as Senator Jones's opponent in that special election, but I think that there is a lot of potential in Alabama. I think that the not productive part is the fact that how we run our party, whether that's a county party, a state party, or, our national party, people are going to be looking at that. And maybe they're not intentionally thinking about, how they run their party is going to be indicative of how they're going to run government. But if you have a very efficient party, if you have a party that's very focused on winning elections and communicating a message, then voters see that. But if voters see dysfunction, that does in some way translate to how they think Democrats will behave in government. And so we have to model the best behavior as Democrats in terms of how we run our organization. And we should be laser focused on winning elections. That means embracing a big tent. That means engaging in coalitional politics. That means acknowledging that the party demographics have been changing over a very long time in the South, and that the way we win is that we don't win through this weird addition through subtraction method. We have to win by, adding more folks to our side than the Republicans. And I think that healing that dysfunction would be really great, because that allows us to also focus on winning elections. Every time we are battling at any level of the party, no matter what the zip code is, over process and procedure, and if things were done right, that's less time engaging with voters, talking about their concerns, and, pitching the Democratic vision for how we want to do better.
I like your answer, but I don't know that it really answered my question, or what was at the essence of my question. Do you believe that there has been outside influence or an agenda set by former U.S. Senator Doug Jones or others that has had an undue, unfair, and I think the current leaders of the ADP would argue unjust influence over what happens here in Alabama as the party functions and in its relationship with the DNC?
I think that, folks are going to make their pitches through whatever channels they want to. And I think that's on both sides of the argument. I think anyone who is a concerned Democrat is someone who has a vested interest. I don't look at that as a outside influence type of thing with an agenda. I think the only agenda that folks have is that they want to get into a winning position in Alabama for Alabama Democrats. And that means having the biggest party possible. possible. But I believe that no one should be afraid of having rules that allow more participation and greater access to as many people who want to identify as Democrats and come over to our side and build a great party. So, I think this ultimately always comes down in politics to, I think, power and money. And I think it depends on perceptions of what people want to do with that power and money. And is that to win elections for Democrats? And, I think that's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. But I do see that a lot of times this is what ultimately this comes down to. And I think it's where you invest. I think it's what you choose to invest a campaign and a party budget into. And that's very important for how we win elections and making sure that the folks who do business with the Democratic Party want to see us win. So, inevitably that is what it comes down to. And that's something that folks have to sort out.
Matt, I only have two other questions for you. Here's the first one, which is pretty adjacent to my opening question. The leaders of this state party, especially Reverend Dr. Randy Kelly, have been very open in their allegations or accusations about what they believe are racially motivated or certainly racially colored kinds of actions. In fact, at one point, Reverend Dr. Kelly went so far as to say, Josh, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he actually called Doug Jones a racist, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And I think he, so I think there's a sentiment, and I don't, and by the way, I'm referencing Reverend Dr. Kelly, but I believe that sentiment is probably shared by, others in the Democratic Party, especially perhaps those who are part of the Alabama Democratic Conference, which of course is the largest black caucus in the Democratic Party in our state. What do you say to people that have those concerns, especially when you consider that there is a historical context in which Reverend Dr. Kelly talks about this? So he's not just talking about present actions, but he when he talks to us about it, he goes back, to the civil rights days and kind of gives it that context. What do you say to people that have those concerns?
Well, one of the things I am always going to be focused on is who is always impacted by the actions and policies of the Democratic Party, whether that is a positive impact that allows for more participation or a negative impact that means taking away participation or not guaranteeing the same level of participation. As a member of the DNC's Black Caucus and as a Black man, I will certainly be very sensitive to hearing out how folks feel. It's not dissimilar to how a lot of folks feel in North Carolina, particularly in our rural counties, particularly within our African American caucus. And a lot of that is an understanding of or a belief about where, like I said before, where resources are invested and what communities they're invested in, with whom does the party do business. And I think that has a very big impact on voter turnout and voter participation and people's engagement in the Democratic Party. But I think also as we're building that coalitional tent, we have to see the intersections. I'm personally not just a Black man. I'm also a gay man. I'm also someone who is non-Christian but belongs to an Abrahamic faith. So, for me, I also see that we have to look at people in the sum total. Knowing Senator Jones's history as a prosecutor in Alabama, I don't think anyone could say that Senator Jones personally is racist. But I will also say that I've heard concerns way before the current complaint about the April 2025 DNC elections across the racial spectrum in Alabama about the Alabama Democratic Party. I think this is something that really has to be worked out. I think we're a big tent party. I think that we are a big family. I think that family is dysfunctional, and I think we have to find ways to work together. And, personally, the way I looked at it as a longtime party leader in North Carolina is I don't have to love you or like you to work with you as long as if you're willing to work with me. And I think that's the type of thing that we have to work through in all of our state parties so that the zero-sum way folks are looking at it is not going to be conducive to winning elections.
Thanks, Matt. My final question is about centers on the word dysfunction, which I've heard you use at least twice now in our exchange. Many people would say, based on very recent reporting, that the National Democratic Party, the DNC, is pretty dysfunctional right now, with Ken Martin having to face questions about his leadership and with the reporting about the huge disparity in fundraising that has occurred between the Democratic Party, or that is apparent between the Democratic Party and the National Republican Party, and the situation with David Hogg and all of that stuff. So, is this when it comes to the Alabama Democratic Party, is this the pot calling the kettle black?
I don't necessarily think so. I think that as a Democratic Party, we're always going to have different disagreements and different takes on how our party operates. I think it's important to acknowledge that Chair Martin inherited decisions that were made before he even announced that he was running for chair. If I'm not mistaken, these were various fundraising agreements and other things that were worked out about how to settle debts and all sorts of things. And so I think he's making the best of a situation as possible. I think that it's important to highlight that when your party does not control the White House, there's a lot of folks who want to give to the party for patronage and other reasons, other transactional reasons. We don't have that as much as Democrats, but I think it's important to look at that when we look at the two most recent periods for the Democratic Party immediately after a presidential election. Our fundraising is not just stronger than it was in the first 6 months or so of Joe Biden's administration, but even 8 years ago in 2017, we've seen more grassroots donors give to the party. We've seen people have that sort of engagement, and when you're out of power, it looks a little messy. You're trying to figure out your identity again. You're trying to lick your wounds and figure out what went wrong. And when things are close, everything can be a contributing factor. And I think that's just something we're working through. And, with the David Hogg situation, I think that's, an ability to show that when something is not done properly, when folks' ability to participate was diminished and demonstrably so, we're not afraid to say, okay, we messed up. We need to have a redo election and make sure that we adhere to how we purport to be as Democrats out in the streets when it comes to elections and how they're conducted and how we're going to conduct our party. And I think that's a sign of strength and not dysfunction.
All right. Let me just to kind of bring this back around a little bit here to some of the more specifics of this particular case that we're talking about. Yeah. As far as I can tell, the only thing that the DNC has asked of the Alabama Democratic Party is to follow the basic bylaws of the party in terms of conducting elections, in terms of founding caucuses, and allowing caucuses the proper authority to vote and select members and whatnot. And that most of this current problem began when the current leadership of the Alabama Democratic Party decided to do away with certain caucuses, and then started them on this road down to do this. And as I said on this podcast last week, and I'm sure you listened, Matt. I know this is a big podcast up with over the Democratic Party folks. But as I said last week on this podcast, it's like there is continually something. There's just this ability to insert a flaw into a process without even really trying a lot of times. And this, like with these things here, it was one thing. Then it was, we were going to do mail-in ballots back last summer in 2024 for these members' seats. And then we were going to pretend that two people weren't in these membership positions, as it were. And so then that would allow the chair to appoint new members. And that's the ones he appointed. And so, I mean, am I wrong? I guess, let me ask it a different way. Let me bias it. When you and others at the Democratic National Party, all right, so when y'all look at what's taking place here, do you see a bunch of flawed processes? Do you see people that are not doing things the correct way? Is that what the basic issue is?
I think so. For full disclosure, I am also vice president of my state NAACP, the national NAACP takes voting procedures very seriously. Are people's membership up to date? Are they a part of a local unit like they're supposed to be? Do you have all your leadership elected? How did you get nominated? You have to do all of this stuff, and you have to really do it by the book. And I think that when we have governing documents, I also happen to be a local elected official in North Carolina, and when laws and regulations say shall means shall. And I think that you need to follow the procedure that's outlined for elections or other party business. If they're deficient, amend them and make it better, make it stronger, make it clearer, and then make sure that your record keeping is done correctly. And, as a local elected official, I know things get lost in the mail. Email goes to spam. That doesn't mean that a good effort wasn't made. And you got to be able to document when you send things out, because that only provides an insurance policy for yourself. And I think that if the procedures are really tightened up, then that doesn't really invite questions about the process, because that you had everything lined up by the book, documented the process you used, the dates that you used, and all of that stuff, and make sure that your membership is up to date and correct. And that's something that I know in North Carolina we do before every state executive committee meeting. We clean up our membership list, we confirm the membership, we document when we send notices out and who's allowed to vote and all of that good stuff. Do you have a properly noticed proxy? All of that is really important to ensuring that your process is really solid.
And this last thing, we'll let you get out of here, and you can answer it as quickly as you'd like. Is there any other state party that continues to have this level of issue?
In my years of being active within the Democratic Party, you do see eventually a fever break and things get back to working and folks working together. I've seen that in places like North Carolina. We had some dark times for about 4 years and the fever broke and we pulled together. I know that, Nevada has had similar issues in the past, but there does seem to be a point where folks do fix the issues and rally together and work together for a stronger local party.
I'm going to take that as a no. All righty. Matt, we really do appreciate you. I know you're busy. I know you got another meeting coming up here right now in just a few minutes. So I appreciate you sliding us in here and making some time for us.
Thanks,
and the work that y'all have done there. We really do appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate y'all inviting me to come on, and it was a pleasure. And I'm definitely going to have to follow y'all's podcast so I can figure out what all is going on in Alabama.
Well, I don't know if we can explain it to you or not, but we'll do it. We'll do our best, man. But thank you, Matt. We really do appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's slide out. We'll come back in just a minute and wrap this thing up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a minute. All righty. Welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. David coming off his grilling of Matt Hughes.
I just feel
so angry at Matt. What were you so angry about?
No, I wasn't angry. In fact, I said up front that I think, they're valid concerns as it relates to the Alabama Democratic Party. But I also think that there are persistent questions that come from, Reverend Dr. Kelly and Dr. Joe Reed and others in their camp that need to be answered, at least addressed, And so I wanted to make sure, since he was on here with us and representing the DNC, that, he addressed some of that. And he did, People can like his answers or not like his answers.
Yeah, I thought at any point you were going to break out the hot lamps and rubber hoses. But it's... All right, Matt, we're going to come at this from a different direction. Now, listen here. No more good cop. I'm the bad cop. I'm here now.
I think he was here. He needed to answer some of those
everything
questions.
was very fair, and it was. I'm just giving you a hard time because it's just the way it was. There's a complete shift in tone. And I was like, God damn, David, I woke up mad today. What the hell is going on?
No, I wasn't mad at all. Not at all. That's funny.
But our thanks to Matt for coming out. I thought Matt handled everything as well as you could handle it, and was very diplomatic.
Yeah.
And answered everything that we've tossed at him. Some of us nicer than others, but it still was very, very, very good at answering everything. Appreciate him. Appreciate the folks at.
I wasn't rude.
No. I didn't say you're rude. No, not at all. David on an episode of Blue Bloods or something next weekend, or he's grilling a suspect.
It
was honestly, it was not. I have been much worse with people.
I've heard you go back and forth with some folks a few times that and I just had to sit back and say, okay, all right. Yeah. But this is good. I think that's good. I think that's good.
Dr. Kelly is one. We've gone back for he has frustrated me to no end at times with his answers, and it just
I could tell.
Yeah,
I could tell. But I think that's a healthy exchange, That's what accountability is all about, man,
Yeah. No, I thought it was very good. I was just giving you a hard time. I appreciate him. Appreciate the folks at Wind Creek for their sponsorship, the folks at SPLC for what they do as well. We appreciate everybody listening. Continuing, leave us, every now and then, leave us a review. Let everybody know that we're still great. And I got to get this lampshade off my head. But it's
it does look funny. Yeah, it looks funny when it's like that.
I need to move that somewhere. But I got Obama there, and I don't want Obama to be missed. So but all right. So let's before we do move on though, I do want to say about the DNC ADP thing. My thought on it is still the same, and it's this. I like Joe Reed. I do. I've liked him. I liked him for a long time because of his confrontational manner, the way that he sticks up for what he thinks is either right or in his best interest, and doesn't back down from that. I have been endlessly frustrated with Joe Reed at so many times in my life in both roles that I have covered him in. But I do have a lot of respect for him, and I like him personally. Now, I also like Doug Jones. I think that I've talked to Doug privately about, what has gone on in the party. I know what his interests are. And I believe them to be absolutely, I'll use wholesome. I believe that those are in the best interest of the party itself. And to me, I'll say this is the thing I think that sets me apart in who I believe is right in this situation. What Doug wants out of this party is not necessarily something that will ultimately benefit Doug Jones. Okay? That's not what he wants. What he wants is a party structure that more closely resembles the structure that is outlined within the bylaws of the DNC. All right. And if you look at it and you look at what they tried to implement in 2019, it 100% reduced the power of the Alabama Democratic Conference from what it was. And it spread power more broadly throughout the caucuses within the party itself. Now, at that particular point, that helped Doug Jones. But that does not mean that sometime in the future that structure is going to help Doug Jones. That structure is going to help a person who is more broadly appreciated by a wider variety of folks within the party. Okay, whether it be the gay caucus, the disability caucus, the youth caucus, the black caucus, African or the Asian caucus, the Hispanic caucus, whatever it was, if you have this thing spread out in this leadership group there among the caucuses, I think it creates a broader coalition that both welcomes more people into the party and also forces leadership to be more understanding, more reactionary, more attentive to a broader range of people, ideas, and concerns than what is currently in place and what the folks with the Reed camp are backing. And what they're backing is this continued structure that says the black majority here should be the folks that control everything, and we should have the power to do whatever the hell that we want to do. And I don't particularly like that structure. I think the structure should be more spread out and more representative of the population as a whole. And I think that the way that they determined that was based on the voting percentages within the state for the different demographic groups. And I think that's the right way to do that, because again, I don't think it benefits any one individual person. I think it benefits the group of people as a whole. And that's why I think that they're right.
And I'm going to say, I think that's a valid point of view, but I think there is an equally valid point of view, which is that it seems as though we only start talking about parity when there's a power shift, when there is a move to change the status quo. And so now the people who have been historically used to having the bulk of the influence, and who have not been good stewards of that influence, now feel like they're being disenfranchised, and so they're then pushing back on the power shift. And so I think that what Dr. Reed and Dr. Kelly and not just them, but a lot of others, and yes, we're talking primarily about Black people, though not exclusively. What I think they believe is that the Democratic Party in Alabama, and arguably perhaps even the Democratic Party across the nation, has not been attentive to, respectful of, responsive to the base of the party, which, everybody concedes is by and large Black voters who vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. And so I think there is the natural expectation that when you have a base group, that base group ought to have an enormous amount of influence over the direction of the party. I'm not saying that they're not open to other voices. I think they are, but I think they feel like there ought to be a pecking order. And we can agree with that or we can disagree with that, but I think they feel like that pecking order is justified because of the level of support, because of who constitutes the base, and also because of the historic disenfranchisement. So when they see an effort to dilute that, or undermine that, then it becomes antagonistic. Now, I will say personally, as a Black man, I have a lot of sympathy for what Dr. Reed and Dr. Kelly have been advocating for. I'm not saying I agree with all of the ways they've characterized people or circumstances, but I have a lot of sympathy for what their concerns are. And I think that there needs to be some sort of reconciliation efforts to be made. But at this point, I don't know who can even do that, because the DNC has clearly, not only has the DNC clearly aligned itself with one side of the argument and has not been, a neutral arbiter, but the DNC also has a truckload of its own problems, So I don't even know who at this point, I don't even know who could help things bring about reconciliation. And so I'm very pessimistic about, if I'm going to be, well, let me finish this just real quick. I really do not, I'm a little bit pessimistic about the direction of the party as a result, because I don't think there's going to be any reconciliation. I just kind of see a protracted kind of back and forth, what we've been seeing. And that's very disturbing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I thought you were finished. I didn't want to interrupt you. I don't think that that's a very fair characterization of the DNC. I think that saying that they have aligned themselves with one side of this is, I don't think that that's the way to carry. I think that they have taken a fair look at what has been presented to them through these hearings, and they have determined which side is right and which side is wrong based upon their bylaws and their rules and who has behaved appropriately in those manners. And I think that, I'll say the other thing, I think at the national level with the Democratic Party, I think it was going to have to be for a group of a Black caucus to go before them, and for them to find that the Black caucus is the group that had not behaved properly, I think is an anomaly. I think that that was to me was a demonstration of how poorly they have, Dr. Reed and some of these other folks have behaved and what they have done to try to buck the bylaws, to try to get around the bylaws in order to maintain power, a power structure which gave the Alabama Democratic Conference they had essentially defined minority for years as black, and they had shunned every other minority group in terms of the power structure of the state party, and they had made it it was happening every single time they voted. There were members that were being appointed strictly by Joe Reed because of the way this party structure was set up, and they were allowed to appoint dozens of members at times because of the way that they were defining minority. And so I don't think that when they went before the DNC, the various committees up there, and those folks, for all of those people to say, for them to take a stand against, Reed and some of these other folks, and I not even take a stand, that's not the right way to phrase it, for them to look at what happened and for them to say, no, this is not right. This is what we need to happen right here. You need to do these things right here because what you're doing is wrong. I think it's basically they were the jury. And I don't think they were aligning themselves with one side or the other. They were saying, this is right and this is wrong, and you're doing the wrong thing. And it has been a consistent effort by Reed and those guys to come back to this wrong thing that they were doing. No matter how they've tried to go about it and how they've tried to characterize it, it's been, in the eyes of the DNC and in the eyes of the DNC bylaws, they have said, you can't do this way. We understand that there are more voters, there are more black voters that vote Democrat in this state, okay? And we have acknowledged this by the percentages that are allowed. The percentages will bear out who does this. Not only, in addition to that, they have also allowed for the cross voting in the various caucuses. So there is currently, a black member could be a member of the ADC, could be a member of the Youth Caucus, could be a member of the LGBTQ caucuses, could be a member of the Disability Caucus. So that person would have multiple voting power, and and so that should, in theory, strengthen the black vote across a broad spectrum of different caucuses. But that was not good enough. And that's where I have a problem. I understand the historical significance, and I have acknowledged that I understand their feelings about this thing. But understanding it and saying it's right, I think, are two different things. And I just don't think that they have been right. And I don't think, what tells me even more so are the consistent views of people like Matt Hughes and people like some others at the very top levels of the Democratic Party who have no vested interest in the state party in Alabama. I mean, let's be honest. The state party of Alabama has been insignificant around here for years, and much less on the national stage. And so now for it to rise up there and for them to consistently say, you are wrong. And for some of those folks, I mean, if you've watched any of these meetings or heard what they've said, I mean, they have been angered by what they have heard and what they have, the actions that have been taken against some of the bylaws and the consistent flouting of those bylaws. They have been angered by the actions that they have seen. I think it speaks to not a bias, because they don't know these people. I mean, it just says, look, you can't do this. And I think that's where that has become a problem.
Well, I don't dispute that's where it's become a problem. What I am suggesting, though, is that I think the one thing that is probably underappreciated, I'm not even going to say probably, I think is underappreciated, is that, at least as I understand it, Doctors Kelly and Reed see a historical hypocrisy here, because we've got this push for a particular kind of parity in a party that just has not really done that by and large in the past. When the power was concentrated in the other direction, they feel like, that was accepted as, this is the way we play ball, folks. And now that the power has shifted, there's been this paradigm shift in power. Now we want to talk about parity and how do we align things so that there are more voices and so forth. And I think they feel that they are the best possible stewards of what the power structure and alignment should be because of the historical disenfranchisement and because their voting bloc constitutes the core and the base of the party. Now, again, I think there's a lot of ways that their thoughts and their ideas are communicated that aren't the most effective. I don't think you can be calling people racist, without really, truly having some hardcore evidence of that. And I don't think they have any kind of hardcore evidence that Doug Jones is a racist. I can find reasons to criticize Doug, to debate with Doug, but his allegedly being a racist is not one of them. I don't believe that for 1 minute. So I think that's not only ineffective, I think it's inaccurate. But having said that, I think the bottom line here for me, Josh, is regardless of how one feels about the stance of the National Party or the stance of the state party leaders and what that's all led to, as I said the last time we had this conversation, what really matters most at this point is we have an ineffective state party. And if we want to make any kind of headway at all, somebody's going to have to figure out how to get these people in a room and on the same page, so that there can be the kind of growth and impact in this state that we know we need to have. Because right now, as I think you've alluded to with some of what you just said, the Democratic Party doesn't really mean anything in this state.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just taking up space politically.
Yeah, no, it is.
And that doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah. Well, I think what I've never understood is I understand the fight and the whole deal, but what I've never understood is the more recent attempt to change the bylaws and do away with some of the caucuses, because I felt like at that point, no matter who was in charge or whatever, it seemed like the party was growing. It seemed like there were welcoming voices in. The youth caucus was particularly effective, I thought. There were so many other people that had a voice in this thing. And here's the crazy thing: they won. Reed and Kelly won. They won.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you destroying what seemed to be a positive thing? And why are you saying that it's unfair when you won? You won with this structure. And so that to me has been one of the worst decisions. And I'll also point out that while you're right that historically there has been, there was a way that the party was run, but Joe Reed has been running this party for a long time. He's started going back to the days when he and Paul Hubbard were in charge of stuff. Joe Reed has been in charge of things for a very long time, up through the Nancy Worley years and all of that. I think the criticisms of how the party is run and how it was operated could come along back into some of those as well. I'm with you on this, though. Somebody at some point has got to figure out a way to bridge this gap. And I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe the DNC can do it. Maybe the DNC coming down here and observing the elections and making sure things are handled appropriately. Maybe that gets it done. I don't know. But whatever it is something needs to happen to get this thing over the hump. And because right now we've basically got little small factions within the party who are out, to their credit, doing a great job, honestly, training candidates, going around, the county party folks are doing a tremendous job, with some of the work that they've been doing, and they've been doing a lot of it in spite of what's happening at the top of the party. And so that, we need to figure out a way to help them out, because it's just not working. And it's going to continue to be an embarrassment on a national level, it seems, forever if we don't do something. All right. Right-wing nut. I believe you have our right-wing nut for the day, Mr. Person.
Yes. He's been
He's been a regular. One. Prepare yourself.
Yeah, sit down. I don't want to shock anybody.
Right.
But today's right-wing nut is our current U.S. Senator and aspiring Republican gubernatorial candidate, Tommy Tuberville, who has made it clear that given the opportunity to become the state's next governor, he is very open to the idea of using the military to police Birmingham, he said, and Montgomery. Birmingham and Montgomery. Two of our four major cities in this state. He didn't mention Mobile. Not sure why he didn't mention Mobile.
As soon as Barbara Drummond is elected, he'll mention Mobile.
Then Mobile will be added to the list. That's exactly where I was going. He didn't mention Huntsville. And, of course.
As soon as Anthony Daniels gets elected up here, that would be.
Exactly. It seem as though the Trumpian thing to do is to find the major cities where they're black mayors and undercut their leadership and even defy the data that the mayors have presented as it relates to the need for any kind of federal military intervention as it relates to crime, and just put military folks there anyway. So that's what Tommy Tuberville has said he's going to do. There's no reason to do it. We've already heard, I think, from our friend Mayor Stephen Reed about that. I don't know, since Woodfin was just reelected, I don't know if he's had time to make any statement about it or not. But I think it's just one more indication of Tuberville's inclination to be a right-wing nut.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, let's start here. This idea of using the military against American citizens is a concept that would send everybody's grandfather rolling over in their graves. Okay.
That's right.
Right. It would have been something that 30 or 40 or 50 years ago would have sent people through the absolute fucking roof, along with this idea of granting police such broad powers and never questioning them about anything. All right. That also was a thing that's relatively new. This whole back the blue, and then nobody in a uniform carrying a sidearm can ever do anything dumb or wrong or bad or whatever. Right. These are all really, really new ideas. And, it's weird that they came along the same times as, Black Lives Matter and some other people pointing out some historical issues with police and other things. But the military thing is even outside of that. It's such a, we had let me tell you who'd be rolling over, who are rolling over in their graves. Our founding fathers. That's who. Yeah. All of them. Because all of them feared this. Okay. All of them feared. Matter of fact, most of them didn't even want a standing army. All right. They didn't even want that because they were fearful of the misuse in exactly the way that it's being done by a guy who is now openly talking about being a dictator. Okay.
Yeah, all right? That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Trump's talking about yesterday about how a lot of Americans would like to have a dictator. So,
and we seem to have forgotten about posse comitatus. Posse comitatus prohibits the use of the Army and the Air Force to act as law enforcement. So I know that they may say, well, we're getting around that with the National Guard or something like that, but I would argue that the spirit of posse comitatus is that no military service personnel, no federal agents should be charged with trying to address law enforcement, in municipalities. That violates the spirit of it, if not the letter of it.
Well, listen, those are laws, and we don't have those anymore. So. All right. So, and here's my other issue with this. Okay, as we talk about Montgomery and Birmingham and I'm sure soon Mobile or other places around where there's a black mayor, or there's a black city council people or whatever. What's going to happen in D.C. and in wherever else that Trump decides to send these National Guard people in? Okay. And do whatever it is that they're going to do. This is what's going to happen is for a period of time, there is going to be a reduction in crime. Okay. Because, I mean, they're keeping people off the damn streets. I mean, they're chasing people everywhere. And now, I mean, of course there's going to be a reduction in crime because there's nobody out doing anything, because all these cops are out spread out everywhere looking at everything. But at some point, the National Guard's not going to occupy Washington, D.C. forever. Okay. And so at some point, those folks are going to leave. Same as wherever else they go, Chicago, San Francisco, wherever, L.A., wherever they're going to go, they're going to leave. They can't stay there forever. We don't have the personnel. We're not going to spend the money. It's not going to be the same. All right. And what's going to happen is you've not addressed a single one of the systemic issues that are the root causes of those crimes. And if you wanted to actually solve those things, you would have done things 20 and 30 years ago that would have led to a better outcome today. Because nobody in this country is born saying, I want to rob and steal and be a habitual drug user and be a drug pusher or trafficker or, nobody's born. That kids don't grow up with those dreams. I don't care where you go. Go somewhere and find me a 5-year-old on any street in America and ask them what they want to be, and none of them will tell you a criminal. None of them will tell you a criminal. All right?
Yeah.
And so somewhere along the way, that changes for some kids. And the difference between productive citizens and criminals comes within whatever it is that changes them and puts them in that lifestyle. Okay? And we have done a poor job in a lot of places of changing those factors, of addressing those factors. And most of it has to do with education and opportunity. Okay. That's the simple fact of it. You look at Montgomery and you look at, I mean, I can break down, I could write The Wire for Montgomery for you today. Okay. I could do that. I could write it down. I could tell you everything that happened that leads to what is being experienced right now and what's being laid at the feet of Stephen Reed. Okay. And it's absolute bullshit. And most of it is perpetrated by a bunch of white mayors and white city council people that came before them who were trying to appease the white financial structure within the city and the white base, economic base within the city, and trying to do things that kept people there and didn't send them fleeing for the suburbs or whatever. And so they did things like establishing, private schools around the city that basically served as segregation academies and pushing white kids and white affluent families into those things, and then setting up a system that adhered to that. And then in addition to that, they set up a magnet program within the school system, which further segregated out the schools. Okay. They segregated them out into the magnet program. And so that meant that you could push some white kids over in there, and they were pushing listen to this. For much of my time in Montgomery, okay, which was 20 years. All right. The population of white kids within the public school system was somewhere in the 20% to 30% range. The population of white kids in the magnet school system, which comes from that 20 to 30%, was 50%. Now tell me how that shit works.
Right.
And it wasn't based on, don't tell me it was based on test scores, because it was not. It was decidedly proven in court that wasn't the case, and that they were improperly pushing white kids putting them into those schools at the detriment of hundreds and hundreds of black students every year, because they were maintaining a racial balance. That's what they said out loud to people, that they were maintaining a racial balance. Okay. And so that's all of these things combined, all where you spend your money, where the money has been spent, what you've been spending it on, how you've treated people, what you've been able to do with them, how you've shunned people off. For most of, listen, I like Todd Strange. I got along with Todd Strange, who was the mayor of Montgomery for years. But for most of his tenure as mayor, he shoved crime problems over into a section of the city, and as long as it stayed there, it was fine. Matter of fact, would make statements about, these just a bunch of criminals killing each other. Okay, this is not real crime. This is not real crime, because it didn't affect white people and good people and the people who weren't doing things. But now it is, because you can't shun and ignore a whole section of people and expect that section is not going to grow because all of those kids that you're not educating are going to grow up and need to do something. They're not going to just starve to death on the streets. And so they're going to go out and get their money. They're going to go out and do the things that they think is the way to live. And you've showed them no other way. No other way. And this is what they're doing. And so they've taken on the easiest path, because that's what a lot of people do. They take the easiest path that they can to food and stability and love. And that's what you have done.
And let me just add, going back to our previous conversation, that everything you just eloquently outlined is part of the backdrop for what fuels the thinking of Dr. Randy Kelly and Dr. Joe Reed, because those sorts of things do intersect, obviously, with politics and political choices. I'm not saying that's all that informs them, but that's part of the backdrop. The very thing that you just eloquently outlined.
I don't disagree with that, but I disagree with the notion that what they're trying to do is that. But I think that, because I don't believe that that's true. I think that they are relying upon the belief that, and I think that's the reason that they paint a lot of the stuff as racism and things. Because I think that they're relying on other people believing that that is the case. I think that what they're trying to do is maintain power and control of the party. And because I don't believe any of the people that they're shunning out of those positions are the folks who would not address those things equally as much as they would. Because I think that's where we all agree on these things, is those people feel, I mean, whoever we're talking about, the Tabitha Eisners, all the other people, I think they feel the same exact way I do about those things. And that those things are wrong, and that those things need to be addressed, and that we need to do things. And I think we all agree on those things. And I think that those, to use racism against Doug Jones, Tabitha Eisner, whoever else in there as some sort of a causation for what they're doing, or why they're saying we need to follow the DNC bylaws and have the damn caucuses in here and spread this party out and be more welcoming. I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. I think that's one of the major problems that I have is that they're using the historical issues, and I'm in no way ignoring them. I see them. I saw them all the time, every single day. I know they don't affect me the way that they affect you, the way that they have affected Dr. Reed, they have affected Dr. Kelly. I know that. I get it. I get that. But I also know that I don't want those things any more than any of y'all do. And that's not, to me, that's not the issue that we're dealing with. You don't have people that at the top of the Alabama Democratic Party, whether they're white or black or anywhere within the Alabama Democratic Party, I don't think you have people who want to ignore those issues, who won't address those issues, or who will address them inadequately or in a racist manner. But that's what's being used to sort of vilify them in an effort to maintain power.
Well,
and I don't think that's right.
I'm going to say this. I know we're running over on time, but I'm going to say this. Everybody's not you. Everybody hadn't put their money where their mouth is. I've watched you over the course of your journalism career, going back 25 years or more, when I first became aware of you and the work that you were doing. It's been, going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever it was. And I've seen you put your money where your mouth is. But everybody ain't you, Josh. And I'm going to leave it right there.
I get it. And listen, I don't, and I'm not perfect either. There are things I have blind spots.
I'm not saying you are, but you have put your money, even when you disagree, and you and I don't see everything eye to eye, but I still know that when it comes down to it, I've seen the proof. You put your money where your mouth is. Everybody hasn't done that.
Well, I know that. We got to figure out a way to get over it, and we got to figure out a way to
I agree.
Educate people in a better way, because right now we are allowing idiots to set the tone, and we're allowing idiots to define things for us. We're allowing idiots to basically take complicated problems that affect humanity, and we're allowing them to define them in the dumbest absolute terms out there. And we've got to figure out a way to better educate people and get them past this stuff. Because, this, to me, there has never been a dumber idea than the idea that somebody's skin color dictates anything about anything. It just, It's just the stupidest thing imaginable. You know, I mean, it's like saying your eyebrows, how long your eyebrows are dictates whether or not you're going to be a criminal. It's stupid. Think about how dumb that is. It's equally stupid to think that about your skin color. And it just drives me nuts. So, but anyways, yes, we all got to do that. And, you know, I just wish, can we all get along, man? Can we all get along?
Rodney King.
Right. All righty. Let's get out of here. Until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.